So welcome, this is Unit 1, Module 2, Lesson 2. Today we're going to talk about data types in Python. There are several data types that we're going to deal with, but they fall into different categories. We have numbers, and we have strings. And numbers has many different groups that we'll look at. There's also a data type of booleans. And then we can also combine that information and store that information in variables and lists. So we're going to look at all these concepts today. So first, a number data type. It stores a number. I know that seems kind of silly, but there's some important pieces to this that we need to look at. First, they're immutable, which means in Python, once you assign a number to a storage space, it doesn't change. You can delete that number and put a new number there, but you really can't change the number. And it may sound like we're dealing with semantics, but in terms of programming and Python, that really makes a difference. There are 4 different number types in Python. So the first number type in Python is called an int, also known as an integer, but in Python we use the symbol int when we're talking about it. And it's positive and negative numbers, and they don't have decimal points, and they can range in the value. Let me move my head out of the way. From -9, bunch of numbers, to +9, a bunch of numbers. Notice these two numbers are the same number, except this is one number off. This is a 6 and this is a 7. The reason this is a 6 and this is a 7 is because we need to leave a space for 0. Other than that, they're exactly the same size. The 0 kind of goes on the negative side, and then the positive side gets one extra digit. Then we have long integers. This is unlimited. We can put in any size number we want at all. But again, no decimals. There's a symbol that we have to put at the end of the number. It's either a lowercase l or an uppercase L to let us know that it is a long integer. Then we have a floating point value, also called floats. They're real numbers, and they are written in a decimal point. Floats may also be in scientific notation. So, for example, you use an e or a lowercase e to indicate a power of 10. So 2.5 e2 is equal to 2.5 times 102, which would be 250. Floats come in 2 different sizes. Floats, which is our decimals, come in your regular old float, which is just called floats. And then you have something called a double, which is twice the precision of a regular float. 16 digits is the size number you can express inside of a double. We don't really say which number that is because it depends upon where you have your decimal point, what the actual value of the number is, but you can have 16 digits. And then in a regular float, you can have 8 different digits of precision. Complex numbers, well, these take the form of a plus b, and j is the symbol we use for the imaginary unit, or lowercase j. They use j rather than I, because I is often used in computer science as a counter, where a and b are floats, and j, or again lowercase j, represents the square root of -1. The real part of the number is a, imaginary part of the number is the b. We don't use this in Python programming. It's not used very often at all, but it's there just in case you need it. They want it to be thorough when they design the language. So when do we use these numbers? Well, we use the numbers in our fit media function to denote our starting point and ending point. But we're also going to use them in many other situations. Loops, doing math calculations, indexing. We're going to see numbers are a fundamental part to programming. Strings. Well, this is a string of characters all put together. We enclose these string literals with either single quotes or double quotes. So this is a string literal. It's just a series of characters all listed together, and to us they make a word, but to Python it doesn't know what it is. It's just a connection of letters. It can't read it. And we can either use single quotes and double quotes. We'll get into why we might want to use one or the other in the future. We can display those strings, and we can display them in EarSketch as well. So the command we use to display those strings is called print. So if we go right into EarSketch here, and we type in here at somewhere around line 12, print. We use parentheses, and sometimes we don't use parentheses, but we'll talk more about that later. But for now, always use parentheses. Hello. And I'm going to go up here, I'm going to click Run. We're going to see the results down here in what's called the console window. So I'm going to click Run. And down here we should see it says hello to us. There you go. It says hello. So this is our console window. This is where anything that we print to the screen displays. And this is our edit window. Remember, up here is our DAW. For most of this lesson, we won't be using the DAW. We're going to be focusing in on the console when we start looking at different commands. So how about you try it? Start a new sandbox and try this command, print hello world. Pause the video, do that, and then come back. So we're going to do our example here. I'm going to use a double quote this time because they work the same. HELLO-WORLD. And I'm going to run it. And we can see it says hello world inside of our console. So the next thing I want to talk about is a variable. Variable is important because they need to hold our data. We have our data different types, our doubles, our ints, our floats, but we need to be able to store that information somewhere. So variables is essentially just a box that holds that information. It's a box in memory. So for example, we might create a variable called myText and store hello world in it. And then we can print out myText. So before you jump in and try this in the sandbox, I want to point something out to you. Notice how I named the variable. You can use anything you want for a variable name. In math, you often may have used like a letter, X or A or Y. In computer science, we don't use single letters. We often use full words and sometimes multiple words. If we're going to use multiple words, we want to get in a good habit of writing them so they can be understood. The first word is usually lowercase, and every word after that is an uppercase letter, begins the word. So we had three words, my text, hello. It'd be my text with T with a capital and then H with a hello. We can name it anything we want. It could be bananas if you wanted to. It really doesn't make a difference. We want to try to make it make sense. This is my text, so I called it my text. And then I printed it out on the screen using the same print command and the parentheses, and I just type the variable name this time. Notice there's no quotes because I'm printing the contents of the information that's stored in my text. So go ahead, give that a try in the sandbox, and I'll come back and I'll show you how I did. So here we go. I'm going to type in my command here. If you haven't done this yet, pause the video and do it. It's important that you do these exercises. So my text, I'm going to use single quotes this time. Hello world. I'm going to print my text, and then I'm going to run it. And you can see it prints hello world in the console. So constants are variables, but for most cases, Python doesn't care the difference between a variable and a constant. Really, it's information for the programmer. And the way constants are written, typically, style-wise, is they use all capital letters, and if there's more than one word in the name, they separate it by an underscore. And it needs to be a value that's not going to change at all during the program. It's a value that stays the same. So for example, if I had a number and I wanted to store the number 42 in it, I would say my value equals 42. If I wanted to store our school name in a variable that stays the same the whole time, I would use school underscore name, and I would call it numeral. In EarSketch, we have lots of constants. Those are the names of all of our songs that we have been sampling using the fit media function. So dubstep bass wobble 003 is the constant that refers to the sound clip that is stored at the EarSketch website. One more data type that we need to talk about is called the Boolean data type, and then the last one, which is a little weird, is called the none type. It doesn't sound like it's anything, but it is. Booleans are either true or false, and they are constants, so we're kind of combining a couple of things here. So the constant true is a Boolean type. It needs to be a capital T. The constant false is also a Boolean type. It has to be a capital F. The constant none is something called a none type. It's the only thing that's in the none type. That's the only thing that's allowed to ever be in there is none, and it's the none type. We need to talk about these a little bit more, but I thought it was important just to mention them now since we're talking about the different kinds of things that you can do in Python. So I put them here, but we got a lot more to say about them later, so we're not going to do anything with them now. They can be true or false. That's it. That's what a Boolean is. They're used for conditions, but like I said, we'll do more with them later. So then we have this thing called a list. Well, sometimes you want to store more than one piece of information inside of a variable. So for example, let's say I wanted to store a bunch of colors inside of a variable, and I called the variable colors. That makes like sense, because it's a good name for colors. And I wanted to store a color red, blue, and green. These are all string literals, by the way. Red is a string literal, blue is a string literal, green is a string literal. Python doesn't know what this thing is called colors yet. We haven't given it any context. So as far as Python is concerned, it could be a shopping list for colors. You know, store buy some colors. Red, blue, green, crayons, maybe. I don't know. So in numbers, could be decimals, negatives, positives. We want to use different types to represent those decimals. Remember, ints have a limit. Longs don't. Ints and longs can't have decimals. Then we have floats, which are smaller. They're 8 bits, or excuse me, 8 digits. And then we have 16-digit doubles. So we want to use those. We have strings, which are collections of letters put together, which are using single quotes or double quotes. And we'll talk more about that, why we want those later. Variables are storage locations for information, whether it's a string or a number or a Boolean. Constants allow us to store information so that way we can easily go back and refer to it anytime in the program. And lists, well, lists are essentially lists of information. They could be strings. In fact, we could combine different kinds of things together in lists. It doesn't matter what's in the list. We can pick and choose what we want there. There are other kinds of things that we can't combine different types in here, but lists, specifically lists, we can. And then finally, there's Booleans, which are either true or false. So if you missed some of that coding there, here's some of the examples where we have the examples we did in the lesson, with also the final example where we said colors is equal to red, blue, and green. You can just print that out. It prints out the word colors. So if we look at that inside of EarSketch, so we say colors equals red, blue, and green. We just print colors, and we run it here. And look what our console does. And look, it prints out red, blue, and green. Pretty much what we expected. Nothing that special. So why might you want to use this inside of EarSketch? Well, maybe you want to send information out about our music that's running. Maybe you want to put some data out about where a certain instrument's supposed to be coming in, or what measure we're on. We're going to find other uses for this as well. So now we've finished the lesson. You can find the lesson code that we did in class today right here on Blackboard. And you can also see the notes that we went over. And there's a practice assignment, but before you do the practice assignment, do the exit ticket first. Make sure you do that first. And then do the practice assignment, which is for you to create a script that will store your name in a variable called your name, and then print your name to the screen 3 times using the variable. There's no sound to go along with this, so don't download an MP3. That wouldn't make any sense. But download the .py file as well as paste in the code that you write inside of the written submission box. That's all for this lesson. Never stop coding.